Hello, I'm Liao. Today we're going to talk about how we can build vite-plugin-svelte-inspector. If you don't know about this, what is a vite-plugin-svelte-inspector? Well, let me show you an example of what this plugin is. Well, it's inspired by the Vidsdev vite-plugin view inspector, where you can basically hover onto any elements. It will show you which file, which line of code this element is being rendered from, and if you click on the element itself, it will jump to the editor opening and highlighting exactly that line where your code is. So we're going to build this, but for Svelte. This looks hard and impossible to most of us, but I promise you it's not. I at first also think the same way, but when I went in and looked at the source code for the vite-plugin view inspector, I realized that it's just a few files. Some of them are copied over from the React version of the inspector. So some of those things, I don't really know a lot of them, but I copied some of the code. And after sharing with the Svelte core team about this inspector, where I basically have ported over, and I realized that there's even easier way to do it in Svelte because well, I will tell you later on, right? So in this video, I'm going to show you the hard way where I basically port over all the features from, copied the idea from the vite-plugin view inspector into Svelte. In the second half of the video, I'm going to show you actually most of the things we don't have to do it, which is pretty interesting by itself as well. So stay tuned for that. So before we start, we need to set things up. The easiest is to use the sveltekit scaffold so that I have a ton of source code to jump into. So now that it's ready, let's take a look at what we need to do. If you look at the vite-plugin view inspector over here, if you hover over elements, it shows the file, line, and column. You try to inspect that element itself, you realize that each element itself has this data that v-inspector file attributes, inspector line attribute, and inspector column attributes. So if you hover on any elements, you basically look at the element itself that you hover upon on and find these attributes, these three attributes, and presents to you. If you try to click on the element itself, then it will use the inspector file, line number, and column number to jump to the file itself, right? So we can basically break this into two parts. First is to figure out how we can add all these attributes to all the elements, and then second part is we need a way to open a file, right? So that will be done on the Vite side, where we can open an endpoint. So if you inspect network right now and you try to click on any element, you realize that a request is being made called the OpenStack frame editor in editor. Let me zoom that out for you. You realize that we'll make this API request with some query parameters called the file, the line, and the column number as exactly on what you see on the attribute. And this and then so Vite, Mr. Server, dev server will handle this request and open the file for you, right? So you break this down to three parts. First, how do we add these attributes? Secondly, create this endpoint, and thirdly, when we handle this endpoint, we need to open the file in the code editor. Right, so let's do this. So how shall we start? Well, let's open the svelte.config.js. This is where we can configure sveltekit as well as Vite. Right, so here we can add an option called Vite. And to add a new plugin, that is something that we're going to write, we can come over here and say plugins and pass in an array, and we're going to pass in our plugin. So plugin is nothing but an object actually. So you can create an object over here and say name equals to my awesome plugin. No, we're not going to do that. We're going to have a vite-plugin svelte inspector. Actually, this is just any name. This is just an identifier so that if something goes wrong, something throws error, Vite can properly display an error message and telling the users that this error comes from which plugin. And of course, we will have to add a few hooks over here so that by itself like this is not that useful, right? Because it does nothing but just display a name, right? So we can have hooks a function such as a transform, which takes in a code and the ID. ID is like the file name, and you can return you can handle how you want to transform the file, right? So over here, I'm gonna do just console log ID, right? Just to show you what are those files. So usually, of course, you don't really do things like this, right? You usually will import a plugin and then, call your plugin over here. And we can actually do that as well, if you want, if you like. Like we can create a file called our vite-plugin-inspector. Okay, sorry, vite-plugin-svelte-inspector plugin. I'm gonna index.js. Gonna copy all this in over here. Of course, we're gonna export default this object, and usually by convention, people likes to make it a function that returns this object. Well, why? Because over here, this function, if you're returning this object directly, yeah, you can return it directly instead of having to wrap with a function. But if you like to allow users to specify options, then you can wrap it with a function and then you can take in options. And you may think that maybe you don't need any options, but you never know, right? So for backward compatibility reasons, forward compatibility reasons, I think it's easier you just future-proof yourself by wrapping it with function first and does nothing by return this object immediately. And in future, if you want to add options, you can do it easily as well. So if I'm going to do this, then I will be able to import this plugin from a vite-plugin-svelte-inspector index.js, right? And now I can call my plugin and call a function. So this returns an object. So nothing's changed except now we import this plugin from a file. Of course, we can rename this to vite-plugin-svelte-inspector, or just svelte-inspector for short. Okay, so let's run this, right? So if I run Undev and let's try to visit this, and notice that once you notice that Vite itself is lazy transformation, right? Every time only when you need to load that module, when you try to fetch that module over here, if you look at the network tab, only when you try to load these modules, then only you start to transform them. And as you transform these files, like this svelte file, or whether it's like CSS or maybe a PNG, whatever, the transform function will be called. So by design, transform function, if you do nothing, return nothing, then it will just do nothing. You will see you will pass it down to the next plugin to basically transform it, right? So return nothing means do nothing. And you can do something by, say, for example, if ID ends with svelte, right? If it ends with .svelte, then we want to handle it somewhat handle it. And I guess an easier way is we just return maybe, just for to show you, we can return maybe like a div, say, hi, right? This is still a svelte code. Let's try this. Let's try refresh. Hold on. So this does not work because we are expecting to return a JavaScript code rather than like a svelte code over here in this transform function. If you try to take a look at the console, let's try to print out the ID and the code for svelte modules, and if we try to refresh, you notice that each of them this code is a JavaScript right now, even though the ID is a svelte modules, right? So you know what this tells us, that basically when we run this transform function, this module itself has run through the svelte plugin itself, right? So in sveltekit, when we use Vite, we will pass in a vite-plugin-svelte plugin to transform svelte modules into JavaScript, right? So at this point in time, it's already JavaScript. So if you try to do anything with it, then it'll be too late. So our plan is actually try to run this before vite-plugin-svelte, before svelte plugin transforming to JavaScript. We do something with the svelte source code directly first, and then let the vite-plugin-svelte to handle it. Why? Well, I will show you later why, but in order to do that, to do one step before the vite-plugin-svelte, what we can do is we can write enforce. So if you look at the plugin API, there's a plugin ordering where you can enforce or apply this plugin before. You can enforce this plugin to run before other plugins, right? So you can say enforce pre, and when I try to run this again, you may notice that now this plugin runs before the vite-plugin-svelte. So the source code that you see over here are all the actual source itself, right? So it's still a svelte source code, and our transform it to a div with a high tag, right? And this will be passed to the next plugin, the plugin after that, and of course it will pass to the vite-plugin-svelte, and it will transform it to like JavaScript, and so that's why any svelte module that you have will end up to look like this, right? So now you see that we render a div with a high. That's all, right? So we are one step closer, because over here what we can do is we can read this code, this source svelte code over here. Say for example, if this svelte code looks like this, if the code looks like this, we can return something that looks like this. Maybe data.v-inspector, right? I think I'm just gonna call it our svelte inspector, and we can pass in the file name, the line, and the column, right? So here we know that this file name is the ID, right? It's based on the ID is the file name, and then the line column probably we have to figure out maybe like 1 something like that. So we can take the code like this and return something like this, and this will pass to the next vite-plugin-svelte, and it will transform to JavaScript code that we don't have to care too much. But then what happens is that if you use that JavaScript code to render the screen, then if you inspect element, you will notice that each element has this data in svelte inspector attributes. So how do we do this transformation? I have to admit I have an unfair advantage over here compared to you, because I know my way inside out of like the svelte compilers and svelte transformation and all those things. I know how it works. I know how to do a parsing. If I don't have the tools for me, I know how to write a parser. I know how to write a transformer. And it may struck you to be something too far reach, but I'll try my best to explain through my thoughts, process, thinking step by step on how we can do this, right? And I think, as I said earlier in the earlier part of the video, actually a lot of these things we don't have to do it at all. In the end, I found that actually we don't even need to add this attribute, because there's an easier way to figure out the source of the elements, but that will be explained later on, right? So here I still feel that this is interesting enough to show you how we can write a transform function in the vite-plugin-svelte in vite plugins, right? So here, let's see. Over here, we have our code and we have our ID. So first thing is we need to parse the code. So to parse the code, we can actually import from svelte compiler, and there's actually a function called parse. Okay, not a lot of you know this, I know that, but as the name suggests, it parses your svelte source code into a abstract syntax tree, a tree representation of your svelte source code. Okay, so here if you parse this, okay, we get an AST. Okay, so let's take a look at our AST. Alright, let's try refresh. This AST will look something like this. It has HTML, CSS, instance, module, and stuff like that. Okay, what you need is the HTML. Okay, your CSS is the CSS tree for the CSS code. Instance and module is for your script tag, your instance, your script tag, and your module context script context module script tag. So what you need is the ast.html. Okay, if you console that out, you'll find yourself a tree. Okay, so why is it a tree? Well, it's a data structure that has a node and then recursively have more children nodes, right? So here you have your children, and each of these are objects. If you look at them, most likely than not, they look similar like this. They have their own type, they have their own start and end, and other data attribute as well. So we need to go through this tree and find elements. We need to find like our HTML elements, right? So if your code may have logic blocks like the if, else, the await, the each logic blocks, or we don't need them. It can have components. We don't need them as well. What we need is the svelte elements, right? So we need to traverse through a tree, and to traverse a tree, you can write your own traverser. Basically, you can recursively going through all the children nodes and look at their type. I'm gonna do it an easier way out. I'm gonna get import from the ES3 walker, and I believe it's called walk. Okay, there's a method called walk. I'm gonna walk the tree ast.html, and here I have two methods. I can implement two methods. One is to enter, one is to exit. So at this function will go through every node, and as it enters a node, it will call this enter callback function, and as it exits, it will call the exits callback function. Okay, so I think I just need the enter to know where the node is. So if you console log the node.type over here, okay, let's run this. Let's refresh. You notice that it will have all this text element attribute, mostly text element attribute, inline component and stuff, right? So what we need is the element, right? So text will be just the text itself. Attribute is attribute. Okay, I think self-explanatory. So here I'm gonna add if node.type equals to elements. We're gonna do something over here. Okay, but let me console out the node as well. Console log node. Let's try run this again. You notice that a node element has a start and end, and the name. Okay, name would be the element name, right? So the tag name. It could be a strong. It could be a B2, a BR, a break line. It could be a H2, heading 2, it could be anything. Okay. The most important thing we want to know is the start and end. The start and end position of this code over here. So I'm gonna console that out. Console log. Sorry, not console, but we're gonna assign it to a variable. I think start is good enough. We just need to jump to the starting point of the element. So start is 490, right? So start node. Okay, we have this now. So next thing is we need to transform our code, right? So one way with the starts, basically what we can do is we can we can go to, say, maybe we have like let's like the transform code equals to the code, and we want to make changes to this transform code by saying transform code equals to maybe we can split the code, say slice from 0 to the starting point. We find the starting point, and then maybe we add something over here, and then we plus the transform code dot slice start. Right, so this is how we can basically insert certain code in the source code itself. Right, so wait, hold on, let me think. I think we can't exactly start at the starting point. We need to take in consideration of the name as well, right? So I believe your starting is at, so say for example, if you have strong that looks like this, the start is at this position over here, right? So you have to add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? So which means we have to add const do insert equals to starts plus 1 plus a name.length, right, to insert from here. Okay, and of course we're gonna add a space and then maybe add data, call svelte-inspector equals to, and then I think for now we just need to have the file name ID, and where exactly the line and the column we'll have to figure out that later as well. So let me just create a variable first. Line equals to 0, const column equals to 0 as well. So here we can have ID colon line colon column. Okay, that's it. And then so that's what you have, and then later on we need to return the transform code, right? Before we return, I think I can console out to look at the transform code first, because I know this does not work. Okay, why? Let me show you. Okay, so let's refresh and let's take a look at our code over here. I think we have too many things happening over here, but if you can see over here, first is that how come this main element has so many data spelled inspector over here? Well, that's because while we are making this change, we didn't change the start and the node, the starting point of the. So imagine if you have two elements, right? So imagine your code looks something like div and then strong. Okay, maybe a p is easier, right? A p and then a div. So the first time when this callback calls, your div starting position is 0, right? The p starting is 0, and div starting is 0. P starting is at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's at 5, right? And fair enough, you can transform your code once for the div, but as soon as you transform, your transform code will probably look something like this right now. Data svelte inspector equals to blah 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 blah, right? And then what happens is that when you go into enter the node, the starting point of that node is p, because it was passed. You pass the source code, you walk through the original source code yesterday. When you make this change on the transform code, it does not really, it has no idea that you create a new string called a transform code that has already looks like this. So now if you want to go at the position 5 and try to insert code in there, then what you end up having is that you probably will end up having something like this, which is not what we want. We want this to be offset to by how much we have inserted over here, right? So you're starting, every time when you add something, you have to offset your starting point to a new position, and then you have to insert more than that, right? So probably you will need to know like what is the length of this string, and then your offset will have to keep increments by this number of by this offset, and so that it looks better, right? So say for example our offsets, maybe we have to have our offset at the outside offset equals to 0, at string equals to this, right? And the string offset plus equals to string.length. So to insert plus offset every time. And now if you try to run this, hopefully it looks better now. If you see now, it is much better, and it is correct right now, where H2 has data spelled inspector, strong has data spelled inspector. All this is at the correct position right now. Yeah, so that is something that you have to do. But this actually, what once you do this, you actually spoil you. We managed to transform the code correctly. But in real life, you want to make a plugin that does this, you also have to handle the source map correctly, because the code may transform through a multiple transformers, and if you make changes to the source code, and if you don't generate a source map telling how people map from the original code, which is from here to the final code. Okay, if you just return this and without returning any source map, no one knows that original source code looks like this. They all only know that it looks like the transformed version. And this will bring other toolchain down the line if they want to, say, jump back to the original source code, right? I mean, it's not just the data svelte inspector. If you have an error throwing out in your Chrome inspector and somewhere else, and if you inspect, if you have source map open and you try to inspect it, it will jump to the correct line because of the source map. And to do this, the offset will be off because you have extra characters jump. You added a lot of extra characters over here, so they couldn't find the actual position, right? So say for example, there's error in a p tag, then you know that it's the position at 20th position. But in the original source code, there's no 20th position. So it does not know where it is. So we have to handle source map as well. And so since we want to do this, and since this is an educational video, we should do things right. We should use a tool, correct tool to do this for us. We'll handle the transformation as well as the source map. And there's this library that is called a magic string that can handle strings transformation magically for us, and it's powering a lot of tools you just don't know yet, right? So if I look for magic string, so magic string, you see that if you look at the dependents, you'll find a lot of plugins like rollup plugins, a lot of bundlers, polymer bundlers, all this AMP projects, modular CSS, a lot of things are using it. You just don't know, right? It's at the very bottom of your toolchains. Okay, so this is a very powerful and it's actually a very small library. It does half of the things that it does. You already seen here. Basically, know the offset to basically offset things for you, because it allows you to insert string. It allows you to overwrite or insert string in between of the string without having to worry about the offsets. You just keep adding new strings based on the original position, and it will automatically handle the offsets for you. And you, in the end, you also can generate a source map out of it. So we're gonna use this library, magic string, and actually Svelte itself is using this as well. Let me I believe we probably need to install this. I'm not sure actually. Maybe we do not need to. Okay, let me try. Import magic string, right? Magic string from magic string. Okay, so now we need to create a magic string first. So we can create this magic string based on our original source code, and then what? Okay, I call magic string. And what we do next is we need to come over here and insert it. So we don't need offset anymore, and so this is the string we need to insert. We can say magic string insert. Hold on, it's called insert. Okay, it's called append left. Okay, append left. Index will be the 2 inserts without the offset, just based on the original position in the string, and content will be this string, right? So actually we don't need this as a string anymore. We can remove this, can remove all this. Okay, and then in the end we can say magic string dot to string. Can run this again, and you'll see that it still works the same, right? And what great about this is that you can now return, you can also have the source map equals magic string dot generate map. Okay, option is the source right? Source is the ID. Okay, include content goes through. I think something like this, right? This is a source map. And now we can return what we need to return as a transform function. Okay, let's take a look at the transform map. So return a code and the map. So return the code is the magic string dot to string, and the map is the source map. Okay, so nicely transformed now. And if you try to refresh this page, everything looks normal. But if you try to inspect, you find all elements on the screen now have a data svelte inspector and tells you where this element comes from, right? We have the correct ID now. We just don't have the correct line and column number. So we can fix that. So let's see how we can fix that. So for each node, we have a start position, right? The start over here. And we need to figure out how to get the line and the column number from this start. Right, so what does the start mean? Okay, so if, say for example, let me create a new file over here. Say for example, this is your source code that looks like this, right? Your starting position for the div is 0. And the starting position for your P, if you look at the source code over here, if you count the number of characters, right? In string, if you read the file in string, it looks like this. Okay, you have a new line space. I believe this is 2 white spaces, and then you have another new line, and then you have this, right? So if you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, you get the starting position of P is 8. So we need to convert this back to the line and column number. And what we can do is we can split this string into using the new line to split it into an array, where you get something that looks like this. Right? You get an array that looks like this, and if you count and we need to basically figure out where 0 is, right? So 0. So this over here you have, say, 5 characters. Over here you have 1, 2, 3, 4 plus 8, 9. You have, sorry, let me count again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8, 9. You get 9 characters, and over here again you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 characters. Okay, so where is the 8th character? It will be probably in not the first line. The line will be the second line. So you use 8 minus 5 minus 1 because you have a new line character. You get 2. So it will be at the second line and second character of it. So for each node, you probably have to do this kind of calculation. You can split this string into arrays and you try to calculate where is it. And if you know your algorithm well, you can use binary search or things like that to figure out, right? So if you have more code like this over here, then if you want to find the starting position of, say, 18, then you have to figure out, okay, where 18 is, maybe in the first half or second half. Figuring that would need you to know like what are the starting position, right? So this starts with this has 5 characters in front, or 0 characters in front. This has 5 characters in front, and this is starting from 14, and then 9 more characters, and then this will be a 23 plus 9 more characters. And here you have a 32 with 9 more characters, and 41 with 9 more. I think we probably will need to add plus 1. Over here, this is plus 2, and with some offset plus 3. Add offsets for the new line, something like that. And then you have to figure, okay, 18 will be probably from here, right? Because starting from 16 is this line over here. And then you have to figure out, okay, where so you use 18 minus of 16, and then you know it extra 2 more characters. So line number is 1, 2, 3, and then column number will be 1, 2, right? 18 minus 16. So this is what you will have to implement yourself. But there's everything in Node.js, there's a library for it. And I believe this library called locate character, and that is what we're going to import to use. So this library called locate character, we don't really have to install it because actually I'm not sure. We probably have to install this. So let's try to install it. Yarn add dev locate character, and we can take a look at npm on how we can use this library locate character. Let's see. Okay, so here you have this function called locate, and you take in, you pass in the string itself, and then I think the one you want to use is to get locator. You pass in the string itself, and then if you locate with the number of characters, it returns you the line and the column number. Okay, so this is what we need. Let's go back from here, get locator. Here we have our locator, goes to get locator, the source code, and locator, and I believe here we can line and column equals to locator get, yeah, basically just call locate a start, right? And line and column, and I believe line and column returns from here always starts with a 0. So if you want one base line numbers, you have to offset line with 1. Okay, there's also offset column. But I believe we might. I'm not sure whether it returns, but let's try that as well. So offset line goes to, oh sorry, get locator. Oops, I think it should be the same. Is it offset line 1, offset column 1? So there we go, and let's try to run dev again. Now let's refresh this page. If we inspect again and if we look at here, now we have basically we have the right line and column number. So this is the welcome image, right? Let's try to jump over here to this source routes with this file. And correctly, we jump into the right position, line 19 with the character, the 5th character, which is over here. And there we go. We've basically figured our first step, which is to find line, the file name, the line and columns, and add it into attribute for all our elements. So we have done that, right? So now the next step is to basically add an endpoint so that we can jump on open an endpoint in the Vidsdev server so that we can jump to that, so that when we visit this endpoint we can jump to that file location. So let's do that as the next step. So here let's clean this. So I think we can remove any console log now. Okay, so here we have transform. Okay, the next thing is we need to add an endpoint to the Vidsdev server, and let's figure out where we can do that. Right, so specific hooks, you can have this called the configure server, which you can configure the Vidsdev server. You take in this server, and the first example you can see here is you can take in server and add new middlewares. So here, what we can do is we can use this middleware to handle requests, add a new endpoint. Okay, so here middleware use, and then like this, and let's see okay, so let's see what we have over here. Console log request. So for each request, you get all these things. I think we probably need some example over here. So I can't remember the code directly. So let's visit Vids plugin view inspect. Let's find out the source code. It should be somewhere here. Source, the it's the middleware. It's a launch editor middleware. So okay, your request URL starts with, okay, I think we can do this URL. Okay, let's see. So we visit all the URL. If you refresh this page, you find that any URL visits, you print it out. So maybe we can say if URL equals to we have our special svelte open editor, svelte inspector open editor, right? So if this is true, then we need to do something. And okay, what should we do? Well, then we can read from the request query the file, the line, the column. I think we only need one thing is the file, and we can say file the split by the colon. We get the file path, line, and the column. And with that, we can open launch editor. Okay, we just need to do launch editor like this. The file path, line, convert the number, column. Okay, so we need this launch editor. And this is the part where basically I'm not gonna implement ourselves. You can come over here and copy this, and this is actually forked over from or copied over from the React Dev utils from the Create React app, where basically if you have used Create React app to start a React project, and if you run into errors or things like that, you have an error pop up, and you click on one of the link, the URL, it will jump to the editor, and the source code for that is over here. So if you copy all this, and you can, maybe I'm gonna call it launch editor JS. Paste all this in. One thing I will have to handle is that this is written in type. This has types in it, so you have to remove any TypeScript text types. Yeah, we have to remove all this. Okay. Okay, launch editor. I think we are good right now. So we need to import this launch editor. Import launch editor. Yes. And okay, I think let's restart our server. Hold on, chalk. Okay, launch editor needs chalk. Let's just import. Let's just install this first. Shell code. Okay, we need shell code as well. Young dev shell code. Okay, let's try and restart. Young dev. Okay. Now let's try and so this is our so now nothing happening because our middleware handles all the requests, but it needs to this middleware is trying to handle this. Once you add a middleware, you need to handle it. If you don't want to handle it, you should call the next, right? So here I think we need to call next like this. And since we handle it, we need to also say we should end this request. I believe let's take a look how it handles. It called rest.end. Okay, so we handle by ending the request, sending an end response. This we have to pass into the next middleware to handle it. So let's try again. Now refresh, you can see the page coming up. If you inspect, you find one of this, right? So what our goal is, we can open up the same URL, localhost 3000, and then let's try from our URL. we will want to call this thing over here, and then with query param calls file equals to this whole string over here. So let's do that. Let's try run this. Hold on. Let's try and console log request.url. Try restart again. Apparently it's okay. We have our query param, so this does not equals to, it has to start with. Sorry, that's why that starts with. Okay. Press a query as it is undefined. Hold on. Let's try and figure out how we get the request.query. Okay, how about this? I think because this the middleware over here does other stuff to basically parse the query, right? So I think we can handle that ourselves. So URL equals to request.url. New URL. Base would be, I think let's just add random things like local host. Okay. So this is just to parse the URL. Okay, you need a base because this is a relative path that does not have the host name. So we just pass in a base for this, and then we parse our URL. So over here, URL has, if you console log URL, it has a tons of things. Okay, it has the href, which is the URL, the full URL. That's the path name, which is the path that you are visiting. It also have search or search params. Okay, so we just I think we compare path names equals to this. Sorry, not request, but URL.path name equals to this, and URL dot search params dot get file is this. Okay, and let's try restart this. Should be correct right now. So if we refresh this, it should jump to this line, this section over here. Okay, if I come over here, let's try and inspect other path. Let's see what are we inspecting at right now. If you're looking at the let's see, we're looking at the counter, right? The counter number. So here we have this, and let's try to visit this file, like this, and then we enter, and then boom. Once you visit this URL, it opens your editor with the correct line and the line number, column number, file name, right? So the next thing that we need to do is to basically figure a way from the vite-plugin-svelte to inject certain runtime code that runs in your page, right? Run some code over here. Then basically when you hover on any elements, it shows this tooltip of what is the file, the line, the column name, and if you click on that element, it makes a request to that svelte-inspector, open editor endpoint, and opens the editor for us. So for that, we have to find a way to inject that runtime code, and it's not that straightforward if you're using sveltekit. It's the reason is because in sveltekit we do like server-side rendering, and in that, when we are doing that, we kind of handle like server render requests or handle the index HTML ourselves. Okay, if you look at Vite plugins, there's this plugin called the transform index HTML hook. I tried before. This hook is not being called at all because we aren't using this. The sveltekit itself isn't using this at all. Okay, it's being used by the Vite plugin view inspector, but it's not used by our sveltekit. So because if you have this, it's much easier. Because this transforms the index HTML, so you can add another script tag in the index HTML to load certain runtime code, and that's it. but unfortunately we can't really do that from here. So this is, yeah, so we will have to figure other way around, and I'm a bit reluctant to show you the way I figured it out. But we basically, this is just a proof of concept of doing this. We'll probably have a proper way, or we're gonna have a proper way around of doing this if we're gonna support it properly in like our Vite plugin Svelte and also sveltekit. Right, so here a ugly way to do this is that I noticed that, okay, let me add a console log over here in the transform, console log ID. I noticed that because of sveltekit and Vite plugin svelte, because of sveltekit, okay, mainly because of sveltekit in the dev runtime, you always have this thing called the sveltekit. Sorry, let me find. Is it? There's always a hot module reloading runtime, svelte HMR runtime. So we can, and there's only one being loaded throughout the lifetime of your dev server. Okay, this is your runtime code for the hot module reloading. And once you load that, you most likely just load that once, you don't load it multiple times. So that will be a great place to basically let us modify the code to add more things. Okay, so here let's do that. If the ID equals to this, or it ends with what we are going to do is we are going to return code plus, and we're going to add a few more lines in here. I'm going to say let's just try console log hi. Okay, and if you try to restart this again, and if you try to refresh our page, you inspect, refresh, you notice that we have a hi, right? You see, I mean, refresh again, you see hi from here, right? If you inspect, you look here, this is our module hot module reloading runtime code, but we add one more line over here to add our code, right? So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to add import statements, and since because this is just a so here we're gonna so since we are running with Vite and sveltekit, over here we are going to cheat a little bit by adding importing like from app from lib. Okay, I'm not sure whether we should okay, I think better not. So let's just try to import a new code, runtime code. I'm gonna call it something. We're gonna hide that runtime. We're gonna put that runtime code in a node module so that it's so we load something like this foo svelte inspector dot index.js. Okay, maybe we import the full path and see whether it works. Okay, so let's try. Let's have a file called runtime import console log hi. Okay, hi from runtime, and here we're gonna replace this with import and we're gonna have the full path. Let's try to, okay, I think let's just cheat by copy path, paste the whole thing in like this. Okay, save this and try to restart. The request URL is outside of Vite serving allow list. Okay. Okay. So maybe we can just move this to a source, new file, inspector. So this is just this is not how to do in real life. This is just for us to find a quick way to sorry, add a runtime code in your source code, right? So in real life, when you build this as a package, a plugin, you probably have this file right beside your inspector, and you have a way to provide the full path, and you won't run into this because whatever you're installing is coming from the node modules folder, so you are safe. But now, because we have this plugin inspector within the project root somewhere else that's not within a source folder nor the node modules folder, that's why it is complaining. But we're not gonna fix it correctly. We're gonna create a file instead, move it to the source folder, and we gonna use this path instead, right? Instead. So let's try this. Let's try restart. I think we are safe. And if we refresh, this, why is this error? Forbidden. Why is it forbidden? Console log. Okay, I think I'm not sure why it says forbidden, but we do see a high from runtime. And we are good. So now, our runtime code, what should we do? Okay, so here in the runtime code, what we're gonna do here is that we're going to find all the elements. We need to right, document.query selector all elements. Sorry, where's the element? Or rather, we don't have to select all elements. We add document.body, the add event listener, mouse move, function event. Okay, console log event.target. Over here, if you try to refresh this again, if you try to look at the console, you see that as our mouse move, it shows where our mouse is hover upon. So here we have all these different elements, right? So here we get these elements. If we can then if we click on any element, right? So say for example, we also add another thing called click. Then we can basically get this inspector out, right? So you can get events.target.dataset.svelte-inspector. If you console log this, you'll find, right? Hold on, I think we have too much console. It's a bit confusing now. It will show you this path, right? And what we'll need to do is to call the endpoint fetch. I think we can call like this. What's our point again? Our endpoint is the svelte inspector open editor. Query params is the file equals to this attribute, the data attribute that we have. And yeah, we don't have to care what is returned or whatever. You just fetch this, and hopefully it will open the editor for us, right? So here, if I click on the image, we'll jump to the image element, right? So nice, so cool. If you click on the try editing source here, we'll jump to the strong because we're clicking on the bold strong text over here. Click on the minus sign, you would jump to here. Apparently this is an SVG within a button that does decrement. So yeah, we are very, we almost have the whole thing up now. So to make it look nicer, we can use a svelte component to do this for us, right? Remember, you have a tooltip, you have your toggle states of whether you should show or you should enable this mode or not. All this can actually be encapsulated within a svelte component, and I believe that will make things much easier. Okay, so here you can let's cut this away first. You can have import inspector from the inspector.svelte, and let's mount this new inspector. Target is document.body. Okay, so we import this svelte component and we mount it in, right? So if you're not sure if we have this component correctly, let's try to import unmount from svelte on mount. Okay. Of course, we should properly clean this up. Let's have a click. If click. Oops. Function on click. Let's see what's missing. Correct on click. And we need to return a cleanup function in our onMount to basically remove event listeners. Right? Whenever you add, one thing you need to do, remember to do, is to remove it. Okay, you add and remove. Okay, so on mouse move, here you need to also remember to remove it. Remove event listeners. And basically these two event listeners does not have to be within the onMount function. We can have it here. Okay. No particular reason. It just doesn't have to be in there. You can have be in there as well. It doesn't really matter. Here, we can have declare a few states. Okay. So here, first thing is we need to see if we are inspector mode. Okay. By default, let's just make it true first. Okay. Then what we can have next is what is the current file that you are the current elements or the file that you are currently hover upon. I think we can save this as a variable called file equals null for now. Okay, so since we are saving this over here, then we don't need this. We just say file. Okay, and on mouse move, what we can do is event file equals to the target elements dataset svelte inspector. Okay, so you can on mouse move you keep updating it, and we don't have to really update this every time. We just check if only inspector mode, then we do this. Okay, and same thing goes with on click. If you're not in inspector mode, clicking on anything shouldn't trigger anything at all. Okay, so once we have this, next thing we need to do is probably parse this. We reactively declare some variables over here. Okay, so here we have file path, line, column, parse file. Okay, parse the file. So if file is null, then all these three are null. If it has something, then file path is the path, the line, the column. Okay, here we can do this function parse file. This is the file path, line, column equals to the file.split. Oops. else returns the this tree, but they are all null. Or just return empty object, right? Once you destructure, you get undefined for all of them. Okay, so now we have this. Okay, we are great. We are good. Now, next thing also, we will have to have a div. Okay, so if we are in inspector mode, we're gonna show this div. Okay, this div let us know where the show us the say. I'm gonna use UL instead, an unordered list. So because each point is just a this item, right? So first is you have the file path, you have the line, the column. Okay, I'm gonna add some title to it as well. Okay, inspector modes. If we have all this, we have all this. I think we should also end file. Okay, let's try refresh this. Oops, refresh this. So now let's see, where are we? Okay, as we are moving along, hovering along, we can see that we have this updating along the way, right? We mount this in the body, and this is in the body. You see as we hover to different components, you see this. So this will have to follow our mouse, right? So we have to make it position absolute, okay? And then we have our top and left position or to equals to our mouse position. So let's do that. That shouldn't be too hard. Let's try it. Let's style equals to position absolute. And top equals to top px. Left equals to left px. And then we'll need the top and left. The top equals to 0. Let's left equals to 0. Now as we have mouse move, we also will need to update this top equals to event dot I think x. I can't remember the exact. Okay, at least should be y, and this should be left. Let's try refresh this. Yeah, as we move along, you see that this updates, this values updates. Now we just need a better styling. Let's see. Top position. Background black. Okay, no, RGBA 000. Let's give it like a 80% black, and then the color should be white. Try refresh this. Okay, looks nice. I think font is a bit too big. Font size equals to 12 pixel. Small enough. As we hover, you see that this is from counter. I think there's some padding and margin that I don't like. Let me just try and remove that. I think this is getting too much. I'm trying to add. Okay, I think it's okay. I think I always change my mind when I do something. Okay, I was thinking that this is a bit too much, so I'm trying to add a style tag over here. But I guess if we break it up, this looks okay now. Let's have a padding equals to 0, margin equals to 0. This looks bad, slightly better. List decoration equals to none. List decoration style, I think. Sorry, I can't remember the exact thing. It's called. It should be called a list style. Sorry, list style is none. So you don't have the bullet points. Yeah. Okay. So this looks a bit weird. I'm not sure why the position is like this, top and left. Let's see. Something is off a bit. Okay, I believe. Okay. Sorry. I believe this should be the offset y, and this is the offset x. Is it? Let's try. Hold on. I think we're not sure what is the offset. Okay, sorry. Hold on. Let's try to print out. Is it like a client X, client Y or something? So I always confuse with like the page X, page Y, client Y, screen X, screen Y. There's multiple. Okay, I believe we need the page X and page Y. Page top should be based on the Y, left should be based on the X, and okay, looks good. Yeah, so now we are correctly left and top heading. Now it's right below. The top left corner is right at the cursor. Right, we can have a little bit of offset. Say for example, top plus maybe 5 and left plus 5. Then we have slightly a bit distance from it. And now if you click on things, you see that it changes if you hover over. Right, so try to zoom this up. If you try to hover over a counter, you see that the file path is at a counter, and if you click on line 26 column 4, if you click into it, it jumps to line 26 and column 4. Okay, so inspector here, we can make it even. Now we have an inspector mode. Of course, we have to have a way to toggle that on or off. I'm gonna add a very simple checkbox for this. Toggle inspector. Label. Sorry, I should use label instead. Label. Because we're gonna add a checkbox in within itself, right? Input type checkbox. Toggle inspector. Bind value is the inspector mode, and we're gonna have this at the position absolute. Let's see, position absolute, top equals to 0, right equals to 0. So we're gonna have this at the top right corner of the screen over here like this. I believe it should be called position fixed instead, right? So when you scroll, it's always on the top right corner. We try to toggle this on. Hold on, there it jumps to this file. Okay, but once you toggle this off, it should. Okay, if we are clicking on this, we should prevent it to propagate this click event, so that this on click event that we registered triggered it. Right, so on click over here, we can add on click prevent default, and basically do nothing over here. Then it will prevent. Sorry, not prevent default, but stop propagation. It does not propagate this to the up all the way, bubble it up all the way to the document body. Then this on click over here will not be triggered. Okay, so let's refresh over here. If I click on this, hold on, it's not. Oh yeah, I added it on the input checkbox instead of the label. So that's why clicking on the checkbox has no effect, but label has something. Okay, so let's try this. Click on label. Yeah, okay. So once you toggle this, we are switching the inspector mode. So inspector mode is true and false. How come we are still seeing this lying around? Something is not right. Inspector mode. Okay, let's print out the inspector mode as well. It should not allow us to. Hey, hold on. How come we can't bind this? What is inspector mode? True. Bind value inspector type checkbox. How come we change? Oh, sorry. It should be bind checked. It's not bind value. Okay. So toggle off. We don't see anything. When you click on anything, it has no effect at all. And you toggle it on, then now you see this tooltip, and when you click, it will jump to the location, right? So basically, we just need to style this nicer, and we are done. So that's it. We have figured out how to inject attributes to this to all the elements on the screen, and we figure out how we can open an endpoint in Vidsdev server to handle this, to open an editor, and then we string them together by inserting a runtime code that basically allows us to listen to any click event and hover event, and when you click on the elements, it will jump and it will fire a fetch request to the Vidsdev server and opens the editor, right? So that's it. It's not that hard. It's not too easy. We spent almost an hour talking about through this, but if you watch through this whole thing, you realize that actually, hey, it's not too difficult. And as promised, when I shared this to the Svelte maintainer, I realized that we have Svelte actually added some things for you that you don't have to actually even like add these data attributes to all the Svelte elements to get this information. This information has already attached to all the elements if you are running your dev, your Svelte elements, in dev mode, right? So if you look at the Svelte, REPL over here, if I try to open this, and if you try to take a look at the code over here that is being generated, if you are in a dev mode, you will see that you have this thing called the, hold on, where is it? The add location. You see that it has this line for each elements that you create, has this thing called the add location. So the location, and you see that the file is this file, and the line number, column number, all of this is here already. So this is all you need, right? And so the thing you can do is, where does this add location adds to, right? So if you are smart enough, if you go to find and figure out yourself in the Svelte source code, then you probably will find it. In the end, you probably will land on here somewhere in this file called the add location. Hold on, where do we have add? Hold on, yeah, where's add location? Oh, hold on, where's add location? Okay. Internal, I think it's called a util add location, right? So every element we add this called svelte meta property to all the elements. So you don't even need to do this in your inspector. You don't even need to run add attributes. If you come over here in your mouse move, so here console log file, right? This is from the attribute that we inject, but you also have this thing called the meta equals to events.target.svelte meta. If you look at the meta over here, let me print both. You will realize that they are the same thing. Okay, hold on. Try show you the console. Let me try refresh. Okay, and you try open one of them. You realize that they are the same thing, right? You have the line 15 2, line 14 1, right? Because we added offset 1 for the line and the column. We just need to add offset, and we basically already have this. We don't even need to inject this attribute in our source code ourselves. And the endpoint, the Svelte inspector open editor, actually Vite also have this thing already, because when there's runtime, when you have errors, you see some overlay, pop-up overlay from Vite. If you click on them, you actually opens up the editor. So Vite already have that in that endpoint. So you try to search for the code in Vite, you will notice that there is already a launch editor middleware, and it's unpacked under this endpoint called open in editor. So we can actually replace this Svelte inspect open editor with this open in editor. Okay, I'm not quite sure, is it this could be open. Let's try and see if This is probably not, but let's, okay, this is from the launch editor middleware. If you search for it, it will tell you that, oops, you can open this as well. It will tell you that what you need is a, hold on, you just call, okay, file. It is file. We don't have to change anything. File equals to this, right? So if you replace this, then if you click on anything, you will fire that endpoint, open in editor. So this is only for vids, and then it jumps to this file over here directly. So you don't even need to create your own endpoint. You don't even need to install the fork the code over here, right? So of course, if you look over here, this is actually inspired by some of the it's also inspired and extracted and forked from React Dev utils with slight modification. So all goes back to there. So they are actually the same thing. So yeah, if you're using vids, then this is even much easier to implement. So that's it, I guess. That's it for this video. It's been lengthy enough, and I hope that you've learned something out of this. Okay, a lot of things, they may seem very complex to most people, but I hope that what you can get out from this video is to figure out how you can break things down into individual steps, and don't feel afraid to read source code and figure out how you can implement all those things. If you find that one feature you like from a certain tools chain, you can go in and learn from them and copy over, and that happens a lot in a lot of places, right? So in this example, you see that this open-ended editor was done in React Dev utils. I'm not sure whether they are the first people doing it, but you see multiple tools, even like the vids or the vite-plugin-svelte-inspector and a lot of other plugins are using this, are forking out the code into its own package and use it in their own tool chains. So we learn from each other, right? So never stop learning. So that's it for this video. If you like this video a lot, do me a favor, hit the like button and share this to your friends so that I get more likes and so that YouTube will recommend this video to more people. Okay. If you have any questions, feel free to comment in the comment section below, or you can join our Discord server, also link in the description, where we have all the subscribers are chatting over there. So see you in the next video. Bye bye.